Arlene Biden, and welcome to At Issue. The act of assuming another person's identity has been around for a long time, but over the last few years, identity theft has emerged as a significant problem for law enforcement agencies, financial institutions, businesses, as well as for consumers. Joining us today to help protect us and those we know from becoming the next victims of identity theft are Casey Goosen, the president and CEO of ID Alerts Canada, Inc., a company that provides total identity protection right across the nation, and Martin Murray, inspector and interim deputy director of the anti-racket section of the Ontario Provincial Police. Also joining us is Tim Richardson, a professor at Seneca College who also teaches e-commerce, marketing, and international business at the University of Toronto. I'd like to thank you all for joining us.
Thank you very much for having us.
Why don't we start with some kind of an explanation of what identity theft is, and let's go to the law enforcement people. First of all, what is the technical definition of identity theft?
The technical definition is any time that a person's identity is used by them or is used that is not of their own making. And that's a very broad term, and it takes.
And Tim, what ways do they take this identity?
Well, there's a number of different ways. We'll talk later about how you do it, but the two main themes are when you have application fraud and you take over an account. So they're distinguished by when you take over somebody's identity and then apply for other things in that person's name. So for example, if I had one type of credit card and I use that identity to illegally acquire another credit card. And the second thing would be when I take that person's identity and by doing that then commit fraudulent things. So I take over the possession of them to maybe conduct some illegal act or to assume that identity to carry out some other, criminal or even unethical behavior.
Frauds.
Yeah, so I mean it has a lot of range. Yeah, is it easy to do? Because it seems to be taking. Now we're going to go into some explanation so people can relate on all the different kinds. What is dumpster diving?
That was a term from the 1980s, sometimes even the 1990s, where people would literally go into garbage containers to get aggregated information, meaning an entire manual or a company's employee list with logons and user ID. And sometimes the stress of the work environment is such that they didn't have time to shred them all or even burn them. So somebody just threw them out, and that's what they used to access information. Now, cyber dumpster diving would be when you access a hard drive of a company that threw out the PCs because they were going to donate them and didn't get it done, and then you look at them and find mortgage information or other things like that.
Now, what about shoulder surfing?
Shoulder surfing is when you're using your PIN number and you're at the ATM machine and you're putting in your PIN number and somebody is literally looking over your shoulder and surfing for numbers.
Nowhere is safe. Now, spoofing, of course, we live in an email age, and a lot of this stuff happens online. What is spoofing?
Spoofing is part of social engineering techniques to cause a person to respond to an email that they might normally, because the address that is sent to them is considered to be legitimate, either president at IBM dot something something or the name of a person that you might know as some position in authority with your organization. And by virtue of receiving that email, then you will respond either to clicking on some executable attachment or URL when normally you might be circumspect and not do that.
And now they're getting very sophisticated, and we'll go into detail later on. Now, this is another one that happens a lot. This advance fee fraud. It's kind of related, but not really technically identity theft. But it is fraud in the same way. How does this work? Because are these letters we get in the email saying, it's a complicated situation, but if you give me that amount of money, I'll pay you back?
Yes, this is actually a really popular one, or has been in latter years. There's a lot more education going on about this one, but they are letters that have come from countries like Nigeria and South Africa and things, and what they report to do is that they are the long-lost relative of a deceased person who has left them, $50 million, and what I need is a place or a bank account to put this money in, and I'll share it with you. And in order to do that, all I need from you is an advance fee. Just send me $500 so I can get the costs from here at this end done. And then, of course, you pay it and you're not going to get anything back from it.
Wow, do people still fall for that?
Surprisingly enough.
Well, the percentages are low, but the way it works effectively is getting a large number of emails to start with. So one of the ways that people can deflect against that is indiscriminately sending on emails and jokes and silly things by putting 222. If you used at least BCC, you prevent the originating person who wrote a JavaScript to harvest all these emails from building up these large CDs of email addresses that are hot and can be sold.
And is that what's happening a lot? People
Indeed,
are sending
yes.
jokes and these jokes
Of all
that
the
are
most
around.
amazing, things, different targets, segments, demographic, focused on that.
I just got one the other day, and it said if I didn't pass this on,
Yes.
then bad luck would happen. If I did
Yeah.
pass it on, apparently in 5 days I was to get a lot of money.
Well, the point about the 5 days is one of the ways to twig that it's not legit. Anytime that somebody pressures you to do something in a short time period, meaning that they don't want you to have time to check with somebody else, is a bit of a hint that it's not legitimate. And most all of them say that, especially for young children. They want them to pass it on within sometimes minutes, so you don't have time to say, Dad or Mom, what's this email about? Oh, it's bunny rabbits at the zoo or something. So they just pass it on to 10 of their friends.
So that's one of the keys.
Yeah, so just to be more circumspect before passing on emails of any kind.
Okay, we're taking a snapshot here of the landscape of what we should be looking for. What is phishing, PH?
It's even got sophisticated to a point, as Tim was sharing earlier, about spear phishing.
Yeah, spear phishing is a new term which means it specifically mentions your first and last name. So if it was Dear X-Bank customer and you're not a customer of the bank, you say, oh, this is crap, and you delete it. But people are now taking specific programs to write the email to the first name and last name, and then maybe 20% of the people that receive it are actual customers of an institution, and they're higher likely to respond because they think it's legit.
Wow, because
But
I've
not the
had them
average,
before,
yeah.
and they kind of blow your mind when it happens.
Because you think it's direct.
Yeah.
Add some personal information to it, and what it does is then it tends to legitimize it.
Now it's getting more and more sophisticated, this stuff, though, isn't it? As you said, it used to be that they just did it and it looked a bit crude. But now, I mean, what about when we look at the top, at the website address? I mean, isn't that the usual way to tell?
Yes, and certainly previously the address wouldn't match up with the X, whatever bank you're dealing with, wouldn't add up at the top. But now through they're able to make them with a higher degree of legitimacy in that they will spell the bank with maybe an extra E or very close. If at a first blush you would look at it and you would glance over and you go, okay, that could be from whatever bank or whatever credit card company.
One of the techniques they also do is something called borderless frames on the page. So you would have, CanadianBank.ca at the top, which is the real name of the bank, and then about a 1/4 inch below you'd see the real color and logo of the bank, but then the rest of the 7/8 of the page is the bad guy's page overlapped.
And you don't even know it.
And you can't see that unless you go view page source and then see that, how the page is made up. And so they're catching a higher percentage of people. And still, most people should recognize that all of the financial institutions are telling all their customers, we don't solicit any sort of changes to your account this way.
But they don't always use email now, don't they? They're leaving phone messages.
Oh yes, that's
right.
actually called phishing. So it's voice phishing, if you will.
Yeah.
And voice phishing is where they will phone you and start a conversation with you and ask and tell you they're from the bank and that they're ready to release funds or expand your line of credit, and all they need from you is one piece of information, and they want to verify your identity for your own safety. And so they ask you for your social insurance number or a piece of identification.
That's right. And because
Yeah.
they have parts of your real information, you believe it's legitimate. They'll say something like, are you still at 16 Graham Court? And you say, well, yes, I really am. So again, when we say the word social engineering, we mean that they're creating a social relationship that you have some believability in.
The age of innocence, it's all gone.